This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you compare direct auto rates from a variety of companies so you can find a great one, even if it's not with them. Quote today at progressive.com to find a rate that works with your budget. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, December 19th, 1732, Philadelphia's very own Benjamin Franklin first published Poor Richard's Almanack. The Almanack, which is spelled Alma and then N-A-C-K. These were very popular books and pamphlets in colonial America, offering a mixture of seasonal weather forecasts, traditional almanac stuff, but then practical household hints and puzzles and other amusements. And that's what Franklin's book was, a mix of that weather forecasting and practical advice. But then more and more, and what he was mostly remembered for, was this repository of his aphorisms and sayings and maxims. And, you know, to me, the kind of wellness, grind set, life hack, goop adjacent stuff that you see on TikTok or these 5-hour-long podcasts these days, that's basically what Ben Franklin was doing in Poor Richard's Almanack. So let's take a tour through that, see how that advice holds up, and then also talk a little bit about how that fits into Franklin's growing political ambitions and career. I'm realizing I should have made a cutesy aphorism in this intro, like a podcast.
Harder than it looks.
Yeah, a podcast without funding is a da-da-da-da-da, something like that. Anyway, maybe by the end of the show I'll come up with one. Anyway, here, as always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hi, Jody.
Hey there.
Okay, so do we want to just list some of these aphorisms? Because they really are still around, and then we could talk about kind of how it comes through. But I mean, you know, it's some real classic stuff, right? Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
I did not realize that was Ben Franklin, and I feel like I've heard that many times.
Well, but, I'll tell you, a big part of the story is, you know, this seems to be a place where a lot of quotes which get misattributed. Mm-hmm. You know, you Google Ben Franklin quotes and half of them then have fact-checking articles. They're there's no actual record that Ben Franklin said that. But, you know, I think we do have a universe of stuff that we're pretty sure showed up in Poor Richard's Almanack.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that a penny saved is a penny earned. Haste makes waste. No pain, no gain.
No pain, no gain.
No
I
gain.
mean,
no gain.
That's basically, you know, Joe Rogan says a variation of that for 4 hours twice a week. And there was Ben Franklin doing it in 4 words way back in the day.
I mean, some of these are really good. Success has ruined many a man. He that won't be counseled can't be helped. I love it. Words to live by.
Yeah.
There's this one that I absolutely love. That it goes something like, if you want to be remembered, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing about. And that's always tucked away in the back of my mind.
Yeah. So I do want to circle back to the kind of timelessness / to my mind, kind of slightly empty middle hollow shell of some of these aphorisms. But, you know, in terms of understanding Poor Richard's Almanack as a phenomenon, you know, in its time and why it was so popular. I mean, let's start there. Why was America at this moment so ready for these kinds of cutesy aphorisms?
I mean, I think people look forward to almanacs, not just because they sort of gave you a sense of the weather or the calendar or whatever, but it was, I guess you could say early versions of Twitter or social media, or was a gathering spot where you could sort of figure out what was going on culturally. You could get a little chuckle. You could read it out loud at the dinner table among family or friends. It was meant to sort of be a tool that you could share with one another and that you could enjoy. It was just pure pleasure.
Right. It was also a common text. So it was something that you could talk to other people about because, you know, a lot of people would have an almanac sitting around. And, of course, you know, there isn't social media or Joe Rogan or television or radio. You know, there's a finite amount of reading material. And so the almanac comes in, the big fat book with all of these sayings in it and practical advice and telling you, you know, dark woolly worms mean that it's going to be, 6 more weeks of winter or whatever. And that just becomes, part of the stuff of culture in that moment.
Yeah. And, there is, I would say, an emerging kind of American identity here. Obviously, Franklin would play a role in that. But, this is, I think, a text that feels like it's defining life in the colonies in a sort of distinct and interesting and new way.
Yeah, and it's very much part of something in between the Puritan ideal and the Protestant work ethic, because it's like it's encouraging thrift and prudence and wisdom and temperance and all of these things as a set of values. And they're like cutesy aphorisms, but they're actually a set of values that they're trying to, not indoctrinate's too strong of a word, but encourage fellow Americans who are reading this to embrace.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of like an advice column, like the one where it's like in marriage, keep your eyes wide open before marriage, half shut afterwards. Like I love reading all those like sort of like dear editor questions about what should I do about my girlfriend or my wife or this or that. Like those things are just fun, but I also think that there are ways in which we find moments to sort of apply it to our own relationships, our own lives. Sort of like if you're looking at like astrology and things like that. It's just fun.
Can we parse that one, though? Okay. Keep your eyes wide open before marriage. Great. I get it. And half shut afterwards. Is that basically Ben Franklin telling me to settle?
He's saying don't settle. Go into it with your eyes wide open.
But then once you're in...
Look out
once you're in, you can't still be nitpicky and be acting like you have a ton of choices because you've made a commitment.
Yes.
So now you have to
Right, which I guess is half shut, right? That's the key there. It's not fully shut. It's don't ignore the problems in the marriage, but have a little more grace and understanding, But I think come, the 1970s, you'd probably get people being like, a broken marriage is broken and get out, who knows?
A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle.
Exactly.
Is a more contemporary one.
That did not appear in there. As a publishing phenomenon, this is really interesting too, and very savvy, and I think ties into this understanding of Franklin as he was an inventor and obviously a politician. He's got that grind set mentality for sure. And so he was very strategic about publishing this and serializing this in an interesting way, and there would be like stories that would run year after year throughout. So he would get people to publish it. He publishes the first 500 copies for free and then gives them to his wife to go out there and sell, which is good street team viral marketing. He does seem to have it together in terms of kind of this building an attention economy here. And it becomes wildly successful. It's one of the most popular, obviously, publications in colonial America, 10,000 copies a year in a country that doesn't have that many people and that many people who could read and that much infrastructure.
I was just about to say literacy is not the highest either.
So it is pretty amazing.
One thing that always strikes me about this is, I don't know if Poor Richard's Almanack continues into the 20th century. Perhaps it does. But the Old Farmer's Almanack is something that my grandma always had lying around her farmhouse. And the idea of these almanacs as these kind of, especially in a pre-internet age, a repository of all kinds of wisdom and practical advice, a kind of thing that you can go to for a reference, for entertainment, is something that it sticks around for a really long time. I think that the internet probably has killed off the almanac, but it lasts for a long time.
I have a little New York City almanac, more like a pamphlet type thing that I bought at the beginning of last year, and it's sitting on my coffee table in my living room upstairs, and I kind of open it a few times a week and browse around, and it's got little facts about New York City and things that happen on this day in New York City, and then some weather predictions, which proves in many ways that like long-term weather predictions and astrology are really not that far apart. It's kind of like, oh, November, it might be cold and rainy. Shocker. Like, nicely done, Almanac. But it might not.
That's actually interesting because astrology was part of the Poor Richard's Almanac. And I think sometimes, Franklin's reputation as being very witty and very practical, but it's also good to remember that, the scientific method and astrology were intermixed in early America.
Yeah.
There's also just an interesting, just as a kind of, what I was trying to articulate earlier is like a text that's speaking to a new burgeoning kind of identity and country. You also get examples, and I think just because Franklin was interested in this kind of stuff, you get examples of like demographic information and other reporting and other like sort of, kind of starting to tell a story about this country and its economy and its people and so forth.
used to hearing my voice on the world, bringing you interviews from around the globe.
And you hear me reporting environment and climate news. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're now with you hosting The World Together. More global journalism with a fresh new sound.
Listen to The World on your local public radio station and wherever you find your podcasts.
I also kind of feel like you get a sense of like what has not changed throughout the years. Like there's certain things that I feel like just have a sense of continuity about how we think about either relationships or virtue or like, you know, thrift or whatever it is that have just like stayed the test of time. And sometimes it's always remarkable when I look back and I'm like, really, you guys were thinking about the same things 200 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like your husband got on your nerves too. Really? Like,
yeah. So I mean, this is the thing that's most interesting to me, and, you know, I've been thinking about a lot with this. And, you know, I'll tell you, when I went to the TED conference last year, because I hosted a show for TED, and, you know, I had a wonderful time with TED, and I thought my show was really good. But, you know, one of the things that I kind of felt when I was walking around the TED conference was kind of like, oh, this is like a weeks-long thing with all these different talks, you know, and experts in different places. But really, they're kind of saying, like, the same 5 very basic things. You know, it's just like, you know, don't trust everything you see. Treat people with kindness. Like, lead with empathy. Like, just like very, very basic stuff. And I was kind of like, the goal of this conference and the goal of like a lot of advice columns and Poor Richard's Almanack, it's just kind of like there's only 5 pieces of advice you can give, and you just got to give them in as many different ways as possible, in the hopes that at a given moment it'll like stick with someone in the right way, you know. And so on the one hand, I'm a little cynical about that, of like, none of this is new. This is all basically kind of just like very basic advice. But I'm also like, to your point, Kelly, I find solace in the fact that like there are just seemingly some very core principles, and what we got to do is just find new language for them to the point where hopefully they just like seep in.
Yeah, I'm somebody who has in the past read a lot of self-help books, and they all basically are the exact same advice, but it's all like framed in different ways, and like it's when you find the frame that suddenly makes sense to you, then this very basic advice suddenly sticks, and you know, you are able to. Anyway, this is a self-improvement project, I think. This Poor Richard's Almanack.
No, it is.
I feel like we're all learning like those principles you got in kindergarten. You know what I mean? About like sharing.
The golden rule.
Like following rules, raising your hand, kindness, washing your hands, whatever it is. Like those things we need. Those are like tools for life. You know what I mean? Like what we get in kindergarten sticks with us.
Hey, you should write a book about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and certainly a lot of like self-improvement, self-discipline stuff feels very in tune with a lot of like what we're seeing in the culture right now. You know, I will also say, to allow the more cynical side of me come, you know, that at some point, you know, there's so much advice and so much like tempering of it that, you know, some of this advice is kind of like, work really hard, but also remember to enjoy yourself, you know, which I think is part of the sort of trap of a lot of self-help is kind of like, what it's really saying is don't take any single piece of advice too much to heart, you know, have balance and everything. But a lot of this,
or moderation, is everything.
right. But even that, it's like, well, wait, is it moderation or is it everything? You know, it's like, you know, I mean, and a lot of this advice that he's offering here falls into that trap of kind of like, well, yeah, you want to have that Protestant work ethic, but you also want to remember the things that matter. And it's not always about money, but you should be very productive and industrious, you know. And so, what do you do with that?
You should be thrifty, but not miserly. Like it's all of these things that are about don't take it too far.
Yeah. But you know, he would absolutely these days be a kind of like productivity hack, time management, optimization of your day kind of guy.
Yes.
If not drifting a little more towards the goopy wellness industrial complex side of things too.
I could totally see Benjamin Franklin in wellness.
Although, have you seen pictures of him? I don't know if it's how healthy his lifestyle is. All right, one quick thing here about his political evolution, because it is interesting that this is published in the 1730s. It's kind of like, gosh, we've done Franklin before, but you know, it's like there's the inventor phase, and then there's the kind of aphorism, self-help sort of civic voice phase, and then that does, interestingly, then flow into a more kind of concerted political phase. And it's in the 1730s. After he publishes this, no surprise, it gives him a little bit of a name and a reputation. He starts to get involved in local Philadelphia politics, and he becomes a delegate, overseas for the Continental Congress. And, obviously he's there at the founding. But it is interesting that, I guess this established his voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it made him somebody to pay attention to, and it also made sure that he had some money and made him a player in both Philadelphia and then gave him an opportunity to be a player in national politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting to just watch how sometimes that works both ways, right? I mean, sometimes we have examples of folks who have sort of built their reputation in a kind of more public figure way and then moved into politics. And then we have also the classic thing of someone's a politician for a long time, it burnishes their reputation, they have some experience, and they go out and then they write a book that is not, and you're like, oh, this person's now a self-help person now, offering wisdom from their career. So it flows back and forth. All right, well, let's leave it there. Unless you want to shout out any others that are in the... He that is of the opinion money will do everything may well be suspected of doing everything for money. I like that one. Yeah. By failing
it has a symmetry to it.
Yeah, but they all have this little. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Well done is better than well said.
And I think one of my favorites: fish and visitors smell after 3 days.
That's a great one. So that's nice.
Mine is one that people think is like scripture, and it's not. God helps those that help themselves.
Yeah. Well, that's one where you could just. There's a trap built right into that.
I
one.
know.
Yeah. What do I do? What exactly do I do with that? Anyway.
I know.
Despite his proclamation that well done is better than well said, we are a podcast, so all we can do is say that we are at the end of this show. And before we go, we will do an also on this day. So let's talk about some of the other things that happened on December 19th.
So in 1972, Apollo 17 splashed down in the Pacific, bringing an end to the Apollo program of manned lunar landings.
And just after midnight on this day, 1989, the United States initiated a military operation in Panama. They were trying to remove from power General Manuel Noriega. We should definitely talk about Noriega sometime. It involved 24,000 U.S. troops, and things get tricky after 89 with Noriega.
Yes, so we should do that. And I was looking into this and considering actually doing an episode today about this. I will tell you that the name of that initiative was Operation Just Cause.
Oh, boy.
And it made me also think that you could... I wonder if people made the observation at the time that you could also say it's Operation Just Cause.
Just Cause.
Just Cause. Yeah. Why are we in Panama? It's Operation Just Cause.
As we can.
Anyway, 1998, President Bill Clinton impeached by the Republican-controlled House for perjury and obstruction of justice. He would then be acquitted by the Senate.
And in 2001, the fires that had burned beneath the ruins of the World Trade Center in New York City were officially declared extinguished.
So do that
3
math,
or 4
folks.
months?
September 11th all the way to the middle of December, those fires burned. And we certainly are living with the health effects of that to this day.
And on December 19th, 2011, the last 500 U.S. troops left Iraq, marking the end of almost a decade of the Iraq War.
So there you go, those last two legacies of the September 11th attacks. All right, that is it for this episode. As always, Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. What is Odoo? Well, Odoo is an all-in-one management software with apps for every business need. Odoo has apps for CRM, accounting, sales, HR, inventory, manufacturing, and everything in between. And they're all in one easy-to-use software. And the best part about Odoo? All Odoo apps are integrated, helping you get things done faster and more efficiently. So when you think about business, think Odoo. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's ODOO.com/thisday.
Radiotopia. From